Welcome to the Brown County League of Women Voters Virtual Candidate Forum. This forum is candidates for U.S. Congressional 9th District. I'm Sherry Frank, President of the Brown County League. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose political parties or candidates. We provide candidate forums and voter guides to make information available to help voters in making their decisions. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Michael Potts. He teaches social studies at Brown County Junior High School and has led We the People to 6 state championships, national championship, and more. Thank you, Michael, for moderating this forum.
Thank you. Tonight's candidates for Indiana's 9th Congressional District are Tonya L. Mills and Andy Ruff. Unavailable for the forum this evening is Joseph Trey Hollingsworth. Each candidate will be asked to give a 2-minute opening statement, followed by a series of questions. We will conclude our round of questioning with each candidate giving a 2-minute closing statement. The order of the questions to candidates will rotate in alphabetical order, so as one candidate is not answering all questions first. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer questions. When there is 30 seconds remaining in a candidate's response, our timekeeper will hold up a yellow card. A red card will then be presented when time has expired. We will begin with opening statements. Ms. Mills, we're on alphabetical. Ms. Mills, we're going to go 2 minutes opening statement for you. You may begin.
I'm Tonya Millis, Libertarian candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives, Indiana's District 9. When I turned 18, Ronald Reagan was running for president, his first term. He was such a good orator. He drew me in, and I started paying attention to politics, both locally and at the national level. I was particularly interested in the U.S. House of Representatives because that is where the heart of the people is. For decades now, I've been watching our freedoms and liberties slowly being whittled away. We the People's independence is starting to fade a little bit, and I'm sure some of you have noticed that as well. The two-party system in Washington, D.C. is broken. Congress is a mess. So I'd like to change that or do my part, stand up and serve, and do what I can for my community, give my community a voice. Think about this. There are 435 members in the House of Representatives. What if neither the Republicans or the Democrats had the 218 needed for a simple majority? Say one party had 215, one party had 210, and that's because across America, libertarians and independents were winning their election. So what do you think would happen with a small group of people keeping the two-party system from having the majority? What do you think would happen? So this year, 2020, it's right to do something about that and restore the Constitution and stop the madness that's going on over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Millis. Mr. Ruff, 2 minutes for your opening statement. Mr. Ruff, you are muted.
Did that cut into my 2 minutes?
No.
I'm Andy Ruff, and I'm a lifetime Southern Indiana resident. I've been in Monroe County and Bloomington my whole life, and I've served on the Bloomington City Council for 20 years. I served as an elected representative, so I've got some experience as an elected representative. And the reason I decided to run for Congress in the 9th District is basically sort of I can sum up in 3 reasons. First, I was very tired and fed up and had it with the lack of representation I feel like we ordinary Hoosiers in the 9th District have been getting or not getting from our current incumbent representative. We can do much better and get much better representation if we elect someone who is truly connected to Southern Indiana, to the 9th District, to the people, to ordinary people in the district, to the land in the district, and has common experience with the folks of the 9th District. The second reason was the divisiveness and ugliness and unproductive nature, as Tonya said, that the Congress is in right now, and that our country's in, this divisiveness. And I don't believe that our current representative or the current Republican leadership and in Washington is really that interested in reducing that divisiveness and bringing people together to make real progress for the country. I think the divisiveness, the divisions and the arguing and the blaming and the distractions of ordinary that are being foisted onto ordinary folks to distract them from discovering what the real issues really are, is serving them just fine, is serving our current incumbent representative just fine. But it's not serving ordinary Americans just fine. It's not serving our country just fine. And finally,
Mr. Ruff, your time has expired.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
Mr. Ruff, you're still up though, because we're going to begin our questioning with you. And the first question is, in your opinion, what are some of the top challenges facing our country, and how would you address them?
Well, I think probably the biggest challenge was going to be my third point that I didn't get time to work into my opening statement, and that is the corruption of our politics, electoral politics, and our policymaking by big money, by corporate money, by Wall Street, by extraordinarily, obscenely wealthy individuals that buy access, special access, and influence in both our elections and our policymaking. And you know, if we're going to take care of, if we're going to address our biggest problems in this country when it comes to healthcare, livable wages, education, our public education, our public infrastructure, all the addressing climate change, all of the fundamental issues of our time, we are going to be unable to address effectively as long as big money is exerting the influence and drowning out the voices of regular people.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, in your opinion, what are some of the top challenges facing our country? And if elected, how would you address them?
Okay, well, there's so many, but one of the top issues is the one that people don't see, and that is the debt. Right now we're 23, well, before COVID it was 23, now it's $26 trillion in debt, and people don't realize that that's your money, your debt. Each and every one of you, your parents, your children, your neighbors, your co-workers, even before COVID-19, each of you on top of your mortgage and your car payment owed $76,000 a piece in debt. Now it's 83. If we don't do something about that, because the country is broke, the US dollar, the value of the US dollar is going to start to fall. And people don't realize that because they don't see it. It's not some obscure entity in outer space. It's your money, your debt. And we really need to get a handle on that.
Thank you. Mrs. Millis, could you walk us through your views regarding climate change? And what policies would you pursue, if any, to develop alternative energy sources in Indiana and our country to reduce carbon emissions?
Yes. Yeah, I think the majority of the population in Indiana, as well as across the country, want clean air and clean water. We want our children and our families to have safe, clean society going well into the future. So I think Congress should, promote and listen to the scientists and just encourage people to do what they can, and I don't want to get into the weeds with all the recycling and all that, but all that's important. And we could talk for 10 minutes just on that. But yes, as a Congresswoman, I would promote what we can do to save our environment.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, your views on climate change and any policies you might pursue to develop alternative energy in our state and our country.
Yeah, I'm a supporter of the framework for moving forward to the future that's known as the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal simply lays out a framework by which we can transition to an energy economy that will halt climate change or reverse the trend right now we're in climate change, while providing a tremendous number of jobs, millions of jobs to fuel the economy. So it's a win-win. We can clean up we can halt climate change, clean up the environment, create sustainable jobs by the millions, all at far less cost than the cost of climate change to our society, to our culture, to the planet. But the cost of drought and food production damage and displaced people and fires and storms and floodings and droughts. So it's a win-win, and I would support a Green New Deal approach.
Thank you. Mrs. Millis? No. Mr. Ruff? Back to Mr. Ruff again, I believe. No? Mrs. Millis? I'll get this. This is only my fourth forum. I should have.
That's okay.
I know. Mrs. Millis, or Miss Millis, what plans, if any, would you have to address health care coverage for the uninsured and underinsured with regards to the ACA, Medicaid, Medicare, or other health care program alternatives?
Okay. That's a complicated question that won't be able to be answered in such short amount of time. So I will say that over a long period of time, we have progressed, and our society has gotten better with insurance. What our employers offer has gotten better over decades. For the uninsured, though, we need to have plans in place so that they have somewhere to go for life and dignity, you know, for your health insurance and that sort of thing, to make sure that all the individuals are taken care of. There's not any one specific policy because there's so many. Right now we have such a bloated bureaucracy. It needs to be streamlined. It's too confusing for the American people. When they go to the doctor, it's confusing with all the paperwork. There's just too much redundancy as well. So I would like to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, same question to you. Any plans you may have to address healthcare coverage for the uninsured and underinsured, regarding ACA, Medicaid, Medicare, other healthcare program alternatives?
Yeah, I actually do have a short answer for this one, and that is we have to move to Medicare for all. We have to move to a universal single payer system. And what's known commonly today as Medicare for all. Our insane, fragmented, profit-driven, corporate-driven, and profit-oriented healthcare system needs to change to a public system, a public-driven, public interest and health-driven system. We have by far the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and we don't cover all our people, nearly all our people, and we have worse health outcomes than all other advanced nations that have some form of Medicare for all. I believe healthcare in a country like the U.S. is rich and as wealthy as the United States of America can guarantee and provide healthcare to all citizens, but we can't do it leaving insurance and big pharma in charge of a system that's totally profit driven. We have to move to a public interest, health care driven system.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Back to you again. What additional financial support, if any, do you believe Congress should provide for individuals and businesses affected by this pandemic?
So first of all, I don't trust corporations to be given, to have billions and billions of dollars taxpayer dollars shoveled at them. I think most of the money should be going to income support for average Americans. And, you know, I'll just say this, you know, American competitiveness is based on a well-educated and healthy workforce. And unless we take care of their health and well-being and their economic situation, the demand won't be there to drive and create the demand we need for a healthy economy. And you know, I much more trust money going directly into the hands of small businesses, of small communities, hospitals, states and local governments, and individuals for income support and rent support than I do shoveling unaccountable billions to corporations who will squander it on stock buybacks and manipulating the markets for their own benefits.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, should Congress provide for individuals and businesses affected by the pandemic? And if so, what additional support should they provide?
I understand the need for the PPP, the small business loans, to help the small businesses to keep them going so they can keep employees hired and not file bankruptcy. This has been a learning curve for everybody, and it's been very difficult for the mom and pop stores. So, but one thing we have to be careful of by promising to do everything for everybody is that our country has no money. We have this income coming in, and our debt is, what spending is outrageous. There's really not a lot of wealth, and like it appears, it's all smoke and mirrors. We're barely paying interest on the loans that we owe to China and other countries. So we need to be really careful and frugal with our spending, or we're going to, you know, cut off our nose to spite our face. So we need to be careful and try to be efficient with our spending so that we can help the good people in this country that need help.
Thank you. Ms. Mills, a question along similar lines. What is your opinion on the role of the federal government and what role should the federal government play during a national emergency, such as but not limited to the pandemic?
Okay. Well, when the coronavirus hit the United States, the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, was unprepared to deal with the pandemic that it was set up to take care of. It is an over bloated bureaucracy, outdated, and FEMA, which is another agency, had to step in and take over some of the responsibilities that the CDC was supposed to do that was under their purview. So I would recommend streamlining the CDC, possibly closing them down and moving those responsibilities over to FEMA to save the taxpayers a lot of money and be more efficient. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't want to hear the, oh my gosh, you know, the CDC, but well, they got caught with their pants down. They weren't ready for something they should have been ready for. That was their whole purpose of existence. So.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, same question to you. Your opinion on the role the federal government should play in ensuring, and I'm sorry, your opinion on the role the federal government should play during a national emergency.
Well, you know, the Constitution, in the preamble to the Constitution, which tied the Federation of States together in a federation, says one of the purposes of creating that arrangement was to promote the general welfare. And if the general welfare is not at risk in an emergency like this pandemic, then I'm not sure what we were calling the general welfare of the nation. And so I think the federal government, in many instances, has to play a role that the federal government is the only place where the resources are at that scale, at the scale necessary to address an emergency or a federal level national emergency. States don't have those resources, it has to be the federal government to promote the general welfare, as it says in the preamble to the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff, next question begins with you. Being a census year and as we approach a redistricting year, could you please give us your opinion on the role the federal government should play in ensuring an accurate census and representative redistricting?
Well, I believe that as far as representative redistricting, I guess you're talking about what's commonly known as gerrymandering, creating fair districts. I believe that it should be done by a nonpartisan citizen commission. All the redistricting should be done by a nonpartisan commission. I don't really see the states moving towards that effectively. So I'm not opposed to the idea that there might have to be a federal role in requiring certain policies to be applied to redistricting throughout the country. The first part of that was, I jumped straight to redistricting, and I'm forgetting what the first part was.
Yes, an accurate census.
Oh, well, yeah, I don't think, again, the resources, I don't think the states have the resources. They need the federal government's help to actually get a nationwide, state by state, district by district census taken.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, same question to you. Opinion on the role federal government should play in ensuring accurate census and representative redistricting.
Well, yes, I do agree that we do need to have a commission to look at the redistricting. Right now, District 9, it's down Harrison County, Floyd County, Clark down by the river and stretches through Washington, Lawrence, and goes all the way up to Brown and Morgan and Monroe. It's like shaped like a kidney or something. And the gerrymandering is a little ridiculous. So there does need to be a change, improvement. And I do agree that a commission needs to go in and look over that and do what's right for the people. So the people are being represented fairly. Not the other way around where the elected officials pick what districts they want to, have their votes come out of.
Thank you, Ms. Millis. Ms. Millis, to you, if you are elected, how will you work to increase job opportunities for your constituents?
Okay, well, as a libertarian, I believe in free market principles. And I think the state of Indiana, for the most part, has done a pretty good job with bringing jobs into the state. As a constitutionalist, I do believe in states' rights. The Fourth Amendment, the Article 4 rather, 10th Amendment, and states' rights. So I don't think the federal government should get involved too much into the private sector. Let the state governors try to reel in different corporations, as well as mayors of cities and towns. All across Indiana, they're bringing jobs in from different companies and corporations, and that's how it should be. It's based on population, and the free markets will dictate where companies will go. The federal government, when they get involved, they usually muck it up and do a lot of wasteful spending.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, same question to you. Mr. Ruff, you are muted.
Okay. So available capital for startup companies, for entrepreneurs in places like Indiana that aren't in California or New York or Boston, it can be very hard to come by. And so I think there's a role for providing assistance for startups in our state, in our district. Then and support for small businesses. Some of the Main Street Relief Fund, and I think the Paycheck Protection Program, part of the CARES for the COVID relief don't allow businesses that are starting, that aren't yet highly profitable, to be eligible for those awards, for those grants and those loans. So we need to do we need to also strengthen our public education system, work on our trade agreements to make sure we're not unfairly disadvantaging workers here in the U.S. We have a huge potential for infrastructure creation. I said the Green New Deal has a plan for infrastructure.
Expired.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the candidates if they wouldn't mind moving to 2-minute responses, because we are, I believe, probably going to finish early with our 1-minute responses and would like to allow you additional time for the rest of the questions. Anyone have objections to 2-minute responses?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ruff, we're going to go right back to you, Mr. Ruff, and we are going to turn to the issue of education. What action, if any, should be taken at the federal level regarding funding for public versus private education?
I don't think public taxpayer funds should be used for religious or private charter schools. I think a strong public education system is absolutely essential for us to sustain our economy and to be competitive in the world, and for us for our civic life, for the continued success of our democracy and our democratic system. Education is absolutely critical to every important aspect of what our country is about, and the survival of our country, and the continued thriving of our economy and our democracy. So I forget the amount and what the exact bills are that provide federal money for our public school system, but I absolutely would be supportive of directing more additional funding to our public schools. And I know, as Tonya has expressed concern, that you can't just you can only for so long just take money and have programs funded, but there are places that I believe we could reduce funding in, and one of those, the biggest one, is our military. The amount of money that we spend and we dump into our military, while we need a strong, secure military force, it's awash in waste and excessive spending, and that's one place where we could get money for education, is from our military budget.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, same question to you. Any action you see that at the federal level regarding funding for public versus private education?
Well, I think the money which belongs to the people needs to go back to the people. I would like to see our education be decided by the parents and the local school boards and the teachers in their community, and not by some bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. The Department of Education in Washington, D.C. is too big, it's too broad, it's convoluted, and it has not been successful. It needs to go back to the states and the local communities where the children are and the parents are. I have no problem with charter schools or even homeschooling. So I think that it depends on the child. Every children, they all have different needs. And I worked at Brown County High School for 5 years in the nurse's office. And there's a broad spectrum of characters, intellect, personalities, and some children do well in big classes and some don't. Some do better in the smaller, and then there's some that do excel very well being homeschooled. So we need to have that choice to fit the children's needs. So that's where I'm at on that. Going back to a previous question, with jobs and that sort of thing, I think NAFTA was a really big mistake, and that took a lot of jobs out of our country. And if we could reverse that and bring some of the industrial factories back, that would help too. And that was a previous question, but I ran out of time, so I'm sticking that one in there now with the education. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. We're going to continue with you again, and we're going to return to the issue of climate change. And could you walk us through any measures that you would support to reduce the effects of climate change on the public?
Well, again, part of that is personal responsibility. We are the stewards of our environment, the stewards of our planet. I do think that part of climate change, which has been happening for, a million years, is going to happen whether humans walk the earth or not. There is certain areas where pollution is really heavy. Look over at China. Those people before COVID-19 were walking around with masks because you couldn't walk the street and breathe the air because of their emissions. The United States has done a really good job compared to some other countries with the regulations on the emissions from factories. So I'm okay with that. We need to still do research. We need to inform the public, and I think Congress, part of their job is to do hearings and let the public be informed on what they can do to help, keep our society clean and safe.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, same question to you, 2 minutes. Any measures you might support to reduce the effects of climate change?
Well, you say reduce the effects of climate change, which would be different than saying reduce climate change. We had a question earlier where we talked about reducing climate change, which I would stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry to the tune of billions and billions, actually trillions annually, if you look at the globally. But in the US, the massive subsidies that go to fossil fuel industry, we need to do full cost accounting of the carbon emissions. We just dump the cheap fuel, and because we can just externalize the costs, the impacts dispersed out into the environment that we all pay for. But to reduce the effects of climate change, there's a lot of talk of engineering in our coastal areas where to keep out inundation of waters due to rising sea levels, due to climate change, storms, drought. How do you engineer to reduce the effects of climate change? The scale is massive. The scale is global. I don't believe in what they call geoengineering to approach to address this idea of mitigating the effects of climate change. And I mean, we're going to have to do some of that, right? Probably because we've already passed a point where we have disrupted the climate badly, and people are going to suffer in the future, in the near future and beyond. So we'll have to do some things to mitigate and reduce the effects. But really, what we need to be doing is we need a Marshall Plan in place right now to transition to a low carbon or a neutral emissions carbon future.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff, next question to you. What policies, if any, might you support or pursue to promote social and racial justice in the nation?
So, we've never had in the history of the country equal justice under the law, even though it's one of the founding principles of our country. So to achieve better, more equal justice and treatment under the law, not based on color of skin or income. Fundamental changes in the criminal justice system have to probably be made, I would say, be made first. We can address those fairly effectively and fairly quickly with reforming our laws so that we don't have the school to prison pipeline, the incarceration, disproportionate incarceration problems based on with the huge racial disparities, the differential treatment in our system, in the justice system, can be addressed first as we're addressing the larger systemic problems with our economy, in our economic system, that contributes then to the problems in the justice system that we see so disproportionately impacting people of color. And so while I would say we need to address fundamentally our systemic racism in our opportunities, our economic opportunities, in our economic system, in all aspects of our life in this country, the first thing to do is to tackle the issues in our justice system, in our criminal justice system. And that's where I would begin focusing most effort at first.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Ms. Millis, same question, 2 minutes. What policies, if any, might you pursue to promote social and racial justice in the United States?
Okay, first of all, I would like to say that thanks to modern technology and phones with videos on them, people's cell phones, modern technology has been shining the light on the brutality that has been going on for hundreds of years. And the racism that still exists in our communities and in some of our institutions, it's unconscionable. So I do think that because we are seeing this being played out now on videos, and people are seeing the cruelties and wrongs that have been going on, community leaders and officials are starting to work together to weed out racism in some of the police forces and in institutions. Now, it's a slow process and we've got a long way to go, but it is starting to happen. I think that process needs to continue. And as a member of Congress, I would encourage more of that, people working together. And people need to be held accountable. If someone is breaking the law, they should be punished. And it doesn't matter whether you're in uniform or not. So there's change happening. A lot of the protests, most of them are peaceful protests. The protests are also bringing attention to what needs to be done. And that is forcing the hand of our leaders to work with the local communities and our local officials to make change.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, again to you. Are there any steps that you see that should be taken to curb gun violence in our nation?
Well, I think the violence, which the guns are a tool. I don't think it's the gun's fault that there's violent behavior. So, as a constitutionalist and libertarian, I'm for the Second Amendment for the people to have the right to bear arms. I do think there is a problem in certain communities and with our youth especially, where they are they're having a hard time economically. It's part of it's the way they're raised, in the depravity and some of the conditions, and they get into gangs And so I think there's a lot of where the violence is, there's a lot of inward hatred. And so they're acting out. If they don't have a gun, they'll use a knife. If they don't, they'll beat somebody over the head with a baseball bat. So we need to address the problem in some of the communities where people need a leg up. They need help so that they're not mad and angry. I think that's where the violence is coming from. I don't think it should be easy for criminals to get a gun. No, of course not. We should have background checks. So, and we already do have background checks, but we need to make sure that the mentally ill don't get guns. So, but we need to be careful too, not to trample over people's constitutional rights. There has to be a balance here. And yeah, that's where I'm at on that. The violence stems from within. It's not the tool that's being used.
Thank you. Mr. Ruff, same question to you. Any steps, if any, that may be taken to curb gun violence in the nation?
Yeah, there are a lot of steps that can be taken, and I think it's a myth that several people, Hoosiers that I've spoken to in the 9th District, hold that that people who are Democrats in the Democratic Party are after their guns, and that's just not true. And I mean, there's so many steps that we could do to reduce the gun violence. First of all, the unlicensed sellers loophole that there's only background checks done by licensed sellers of guns. Unlicensed sellers who do gun shows or who do other transactions, personal transactions, there's no requirement for a background check. That needs to be closed. That loophole needs to be closed. That's one thing we could do. Also, I think there's a day limit of 3 or 4 days where if the background check hasn't been completed yet, all the information hasn't come through, the sale can go ahead and go through, even with a licensed dealer. I think we need to close that. I think that however long, I mean, we could have a reasonable time, but a reasonable time could be at least a week, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks for a sale, for the background check to be completed. The violent misdemeanor crimes, there are, the felony convictions, you can't get guns, but violent misdemeanor crimes do not stop one from accessing guns. So we need to have violent misdemeanor crimes added. Better communication between federal and state regulators and law enforcement on guns and crimes and attempts to get guns would help. Let's see, the red flag order, which I think like 20 states have, between 15 and 20 states have right now, where a person who knows someone personally who sees them in a difficult situation can notify authorities and have guns taken or restrict access to guns for a certain period of time. Those are just some of the things we could do. The boyfriend loophole, where there's been violence against a partner. There's a lot of things we could do to without trampling on people's rights for guns.
Thank you. I want to move now to the issue of immigration. Mr. Ruff, 2 minutes. What, if any, steps should our nation take to reform our current immigration policies?
To reform?
Yes.
So, immigration is another area where I think, Democrats are often, accused of just wanting open borders. I do not accept that at all. I don't believe there should be open borders. That's one of the characteristics that defines a nation state is actual borders, controlled borders. So I don't believe that, I do believe we need immigration reform. We need it now, including, there needs to be a roadmap to citizenship. Okay, there should be a clear, inclusive roadmap to citizenship. There should be, we need some kind of bureau, federal bureau to look at labor shortages to help us determine that whether or not employers are bringing foreign workers into the country that would displace U.S. workers or that would undermine wages for U.S. workers. That'd be a step we would need to take. The existing worker programs, the card programs, those need to be tightened up. I think they need to be improved and watched very closely. Better efforts to prevent those from being abused. We need humane, rational border control measures. Putting kids in cages, separating families. These inhumane, insane policies that have inflicted untold amounts of unimaginable harm on families, on children, on people, and just really diminished our reputation in the world. So this is why we absolutely need to develop and improve our immigration policies.
Thank you. Ms. Tillis, your take on reforming current immigration policies.
Yes, I don't think our immigration policies need to be reformed, but they do need to be tweaked. What we have seen down on the border needs tweaking, if I can use that word. We have a lot of migrant workers that come up from Mexico that are just coming to work. Some have green cards, and there needs to be a better system in place so that people can have their IDs, their working permits to come in, do the job that they want to do, whether it be on farms or ranches or whatever they're here for, construction, and then go back to their home country, if that, because that's a lot of them, that's what they want to do. There is a problem with the drug runners. We've seen that over and over again. We've also seen trailers come across with people in them, and crammed in, and a lot of deaths. That's got to stop. We do need to control our borders better to protect the people, and I mean protecting the people coming over, because some of the people coming over are dying because it's too easy to get across in certain areas, and then they get themselves in a sticky spot. So we do need better control of the borders, but I don't think reforming the policies is the issue. It's better management.
Thank you. Ms. Tillis, 2 minutes.
Millis.
Millis, I'm sorry.
That's okay. With a T and an M, Tonya Millis, it could be Tillis.
I combine your first and your last names. Ms. Millis, do you support the concept of universal pre-K? Why or why not?
Not mandatory. I have no problem with education from the time you were born, or even while you're still in the womb. Mothers are reading and singing to their babies before they're even born. So the sooner children can get educated, the better. I think if there's a pre-K offered to students or to families, to parents, and it depends on the child. Some children, when they're that, and I'm a mother, I've got 7 grandchildren, they progress at different rates. They don't all read at the exact same time in their life. You have kindergarten and first grade, and there's a little bit of overlap there. And so pre-K is helpful, but it shouldn't be mandatory or required, because some babies just might not be ready for it.
Thank you, Ms. Millis. Mr. Ruff, same question to you.
Yeah, I would agree with Tonya that it shouldn't be mandatory, but it should be available and provided as a public service, as a public good by communities and by government. The benefits to the economy, and not so. First of all, the benefits to so many children, the research shows how early developmentally children would benefit and give them a start. it would be something that would help level the playing field, that so many privileged and more well-to-do families are able to provide their children with opportunities so early in life. Universally available pre-K would help level the playing field and create a more equality of opportunity, which is one of the things what the country is supposed to be about. But again, I agree that it shouldn't be mandatory, and there's tremendous amounts of variation. But it would also help parents tremendously who are working parents trying to get ahead, trying to provide for their families. It would be helpful in that aspect also, not just for the children and their development, but for so many families that are struggling to get ahead just by working hard. So I support the idea.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. Mr. Ruff, 2 minutes to you. We're going to begin our final question. Could you share with us your ideas on how to build or maintain a vibrant U.S. economy?
First of all, Tonya mentioned earlier what a bad deal NAFTA was. And our trade agreements absolutely are one thing that we have to revisit. That our trade agreements have to stop being based on promoting the economic interests of multinational corporations and have to be written and to benefit with the idea that working people, ordinary people, are the ones we're writing these trade agreements for, right? Not to create bigger monopolies and more intellectual property rights to further enrich corporations and to allow them to exploit labor and lax environmental standards in other places. That absolutely has to be rewritten. But what I think fundamentally, as I said at the very start, what we need to do is we need to get the influence of corporate money, Wall Street money, the extremely wealthy out of our politics, because we're not going to be able to build an economy that has broadly shared prosperity until we do that. Over the last 50 years, we have seen a divergence of wages from productivity. Workers have been getting more and more productive, but receiving a smaller and smaller share of the output of the economy. And that, in order to reform that and get back to where our economy works for everybody, we're going to need to break the stranglehold that big money has on our electoral politics and on our policy making once those elected representatives get into office and have access that's been bought.
Thank you. Ms. Millis, could you share your ideas on how to build or maintain a vibrant economy?
Well, I do agree that when you have corporate money lining the pockets of politicians, then the politicians make bad decisions. They don't make the decisions that's what's best for the American people. So I believe in free market principles, and I think we should, as a nation, do what's best for our country, not what's best for other countries, in trying to bring in the manufacturing and jobs to this country. And it's that simple, free market principles. And I think the federal government, the politicians just need to get out of the way and not be making decisions based on who's lining their pockets. And that was referred to before. So it's really that simple.
Thank you. Thank you both for your candid responses this evening. We are now going to move on to our closing statements. Ms. Millis, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay. I want to thank the League of Women Voters in Brown County for hosting this forum. And I want to thank Pam. She did really good job with her cards, her yellow and red cards. She did a good job. So thank you for that. The year 2020 is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. And I bring that up because this is the League of Women Voters, and even though there's men as members, it's worth noting. And I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that in southern Indiana, specifically in Indiana's District 9, there has never, ever been a woman representative in the House of Representatives in Washington, D.C., ever. So there hasn't been a libertarian either. I'm not running on gender. I'm running on the issues and against the broken two-party system. I'm asking, the people watching, the voters, to stand with me. I'm a small town realtor with small money donations. So I'm asking you to stand with me. When you go to vote, after you vote for president, there will be the U.S. House of Representatives. Take a stand and vote Tonya Millis. Make history. So for more information about me and the issues I care about, go to TonyaForCongress.com. That's TonyaForCongress.com. And there's also a link to my Facebook, Tonya Millis for Congress. And I'm looking forward to this election and for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Millis. Mr. Ruff, 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Well, I've called, as I said earlier in my opening statement, I've called Southern Indiana home for my entire life, raised my kids here. And I played music. I'm a country musician, and I fished. I'm an avid outdoorsman, fishing our rivers and streams all through the 9th District for all my life. I've served my hometown of Bloomington, which is in the 9th District, as an elected representative for 20 years. And I know our state, I know the 9th District, I know the communities, I know the people. I care deeply about the land, the communities, and the people. And that's why I'm running. We need and deserve better representation than we're currently getting from Mr. Hollingsworth, who is not connected to Indiana still after 4 years in office, and is so privileged, has never spent a day not of his life from infancy being extraordinarily wealthy. Is not in touch, doesn't understand the problems and issues of ordinary Hoosiers. I've been working hard every day in this campaign, and if elected, I'll continue to work hard. I'll work hard representing ordinary Hoosiers every day. I'll fight for Medicare for all. I'll fight for stopping the flood of big money that's corrupting our politics and drowning out voices of ordinary people. I'll fight for livable wages. I'll fight for stronger public education. I'll fight to stop the attacks on collective bargaining and unions and on working families, because that is one of the major reasons we've had a decoupling of wage growth and economic wealth and well-being from economic productivity is the attacks on working people and organized labor and collective bargaining. I'll fight to stop those. I'll do everything I possibly can to see that we really seriously begin to address our climate emergency. And so if people would go to my website, andyruff.org, learn more about me. Please vote for me in the upcoming election. We absolutely need change. We need better representation. We need Hoosier representation, and I can provide it.
Thank you, Mr. Ruff. This concludes tonight's candidate forum. On behalf of the Brown County League of Women Voters, I'd like to thank each of tonight's candidates for allowing all of us to get to better know them and their positions on important community and national issues. I'd also like to encourage all of our viewers to please vote on November 3rd. Thank you.